Well, hello and welcome everybody. Happy to be here on this Sunday night. Happy Father's Day to all the fathers out there in the crowd tonight. Really excited to be here this evening talking with you all a little bit about, of course, the Colorado Trail, but also we're going to talk a little bit about some books. We're going to talk a little bit about other trails that people are pretty familiar with. And goodness gracious, what is going on here? Everybody pause for a second. Hey there. Sorry, everybody. Can you hear me okay now? That was a bit of a rough start there, everybody. Sorry about that. Something was happening where I could hear myself about 6 seconds delayed. So my apologies about that one. I think it's up and running, might be working now. So hopefully that'll be better. Great. So welcome everybody. Once again, happy Father's Day to all the fathers out there. I hope everybody's had a chance to really spend some time with their parents. And I know that we've had some folks in the crowd who recently lost their father. So we'll be thinking of you as well. Welcome there to Elderberry. Thank you. Hashtag for coming in. Hashtag over there at Tangent Trails. Just like a superhero came through. We're going to talk a little bit about my Colorado Trail project this year, but I've got a thank you card coming out to hashtag there shortly. So I appreciate your support in that project. And Doc, good to see you as well. And then Girl Plus Dog Adventures. I don't know if we've met before, but welcome to the chat as well. So here's the story. We are talking tonight with a very experienced hiker. This is Audrey Glowstick Payne. We're going to go ahead and bring her into the show here. And Audrey is she's a Colorado resident and has traveled many miles on many trails and has a lot of great experience that she'll be able to share with us. And she also recently published a book, Where the Rhododendrons Bloom. I hope you have a copy of that nearby, but I have it pulled up on my screen if not, because the cover is really cool as well. So welcome, Audrey.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. Hello, everybody. This is my very first ever YouTube live, so I'm especially excited to be here.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun, and like I mentioned earlier before we started, it's sort of some favorite faces here in the crowd, and usually the sort of attendance ticks up as things go along. But we've got our favorites here with Doc, and Tangent Trails is actually his trail name is Hashtag, and he'll be hiking the CT this year as well. And he'll be doing a little bit of hiking here and there. So a really good crowd so far. And Elderberry, Mobby Cat, her trail name is Elderberry, and she and I met on the 10-mile range just before a thunderstorm, and it was gnarly. But it's been great to meet a lot of those folks and make some of those friends. So without further ado, let's talk about your hiking history. So for everybody watching here, I've mentioned a few times that you are a very experienced hiker. Talk us through a little bit of your hiking history, where you've been, and maybe even a little bit about where you're hoping to go in the future.
Yeah, so I've always been a hiker, but I haven't always been a backpacker. In 2018, though, I decided to go out and through hike the Appalachian Trail. So I became kind of an expert backpacker in the process. I'd only been a few times before that, and it was few and far between. After 2018, I moved to Colorado and started doing tons of hiking in the mountains here and like shorter backpacking trips. But I quit my job to do the AT. So then, alas, I had to get a new job when I moved here. So didn't really have the vacation time and whatnot to do any through hikes for a couple of years after that, plus, COVID, whatever. But kind of jumped back into the longer hikes in 2022, doing the Foothills Trail in North and South Carolina, doing the Colorado Trail. I did a bunch of stuff last year. I had originally really thought I was going to do like a long trail last year, like the PCT, but that didn't work out just because of various things in my life. So I went hard on doing a lot of smaller things. I hiked the Trans Catalina Trail, the Art Loeb Trail, the John Muir Trail, the Wonderland Trail, and then I went down to Patagonia and hiked the O Circuit. Yep. And then this summer, I'm going to be hiking the West Coast Trail, which is on Vancouver Island in Canada. I'm going to be hiking the Teton Crest Trail in Grand Teton National Park. Yep. And just yesterday, I booked a trip to Nepal where I'm going to be hiking the Manaslu.
No way. Wow. Some international locations there. And I tell you that Patagonia trip is high on my bucket list there. And the Tahoe Crest Trail, or Tahoe, not Tahoe, Teton Crest Trail. That's just incredible. And to be able to score permits for the Wonderland. Holy mess, you've been to all the places I'm hoping to go in the future.
I'm like the permit queen. Like I set myself calendar reminders. I refresh, refresh, refresh. Like I'm known in my circles. Like I'm the permit queen. I can get them.
Yep, yep. It's a good friend to have in your corner for sure. I end up getting too many permits, so I think I had 4 different permits at different points for the JMT this year, starting from different trailheads. So it'd be
Oh,
nice
are you
to.
going back this year?
Oh no, I'm sorry, last year. The
Oh,
when we
okay.
met at the VVR, that was the year, and I had 3 permits starting Sobo and then or northbound, and then 1 Sobo permit, which is the one we ended up using. So anyway, you've been on a ton of these different hikes. We've got a lot of folks here are often really curious. I mentioned before about sort of comparisons to other trails, and one that often comes to mind is this sort of comparison with the John Muir Trail, specifically because there a lot of overlap in terms of who would hike those, right? So the time frame is often very similar. You can do it in about 3 weeks on the JMT if you're going pretty conservatively paced, and then on the CT you can do 4 weeks or so is typically enough, kind of to answer Stephanie's question here. 30 to 40 days is more than sufficient, and take the zeros wherever. What do you think about that question there, Audrey?
Yeah, I did it in 32 days, took 2 zeros and some other Neros. The CT, honestly, like the terrain in most places is pretty chill,
Yeah.
lots of switchbacks, like chill grading. There are some harder parts. I found the Collegiate West to be pretty challenging, but overall, like if you're in decent shape, you can cruise.
Yeah, I find I often tell people that the first 250 miles are often much harder than the last 250 miles. So don't be discouraged if you're behind pace by halfway across the trail, because some of those sections, sort of 18 and 19, really smooth out pretty nicely. And even in the San Juans, like ironically, those are sections where you can really cruise, especially if you've got your trail legs at that point. So yeah, I think 30 to 45 days is really a nice sort of itinerary and schedule. Gives you a lot of flexibility to have those zeros and Neros. When I did it in 2021, I did it in 28 days with I think it was 24 trail days. So I must have had like 3, 4 zeros or Neros along the way. But that's not the pace I would set for if you want to enjoy yourself. That's not the pace that I would set. I would go with something more like 30 days and plenty of zeros. And instead of thinking how many 0 days, I would try to hit all the cool spots, right? So take a 0 in Leadville, take a 0 in Breckenridge, take a 0 in Lake City for sure. So those are really good
Lake
ways to
City.
kind of. Lake City's great, right?
I absolutely loved Lake City, and
Yeah.
Salida was awesome too.
Yeah, Salida is a really fun town. I think that's almost a must for everybody. If you're planning to through hike the whole trail, it's very hard not to stop in Salida because you have that stretch from US 50 all the way really to Spring Creek Pass there at Lake City, where you're not really going to cross any highways. So you have to hike out to Creed if you're going to get a resupply, or you take a hitch from Colorado Highway. What's that, 114 or something? Starts segment 18. But yeah, that's a great schedule.
I would say don't bother. Just go straight to Lake City.
Yeah. Lake City is just incredible. There's another thing, and this is just one of my personal things, but if you remember sort of that saddle where you make the left if you're going to go to Creed, and then you hit that
Mhm.
really aggressive incline, and that's enough for me. Creed is a great city, by the way. It's incredible. I've been there, and my wife loves it. She through hiked the trail in 2021 as well, and she loves Creed. But if you go to Creed, you hike down, and then you come back, and you have to climb that with a full backpack of food. And so I like to go to Lake City because then you're sort of hitting Snow Mesa without a heavy pack, and you're racing across there, making some good miles as well.
Yeah, and honestly, what I heard about Creed and why I say just skip it is because I had some friends go to Creed and they were like, nothing was open. Like it's very small town. They only have 1 or 2 restaurants. They happen to be closed when they were going through. And you get to Lake City and they want to be this hiker town. And in the summer on Sundays, I
Yep.
believe they have hiker dinners.
Yep.
And there's a church there that the pastor of the church used to be on the AT, so he had a hostel for ATers or for hikers on the AT. Now he's in Lake City. He wants to do that same thing for CDTers and Colorado Trail people. So they make a big deal if you come to Lake City. They're really happy to have you. And there's some amazing restaurants and they have everything you need there. It's super beautiful. And the bakery is incredible. So don't miss the bakery if you go to Lake City.
Yeah, the bakery is incredible. There's also there's the place where there's like a burger place around the corner from Raven's Rest and a burrito place right next to Raven's Rest. Both of those are pretty decent. And Lake City is cool because they have all the deer in the front yard. So, I mean, it's the coolest thing. You see these giant like 10, 12 point bucks walking around and sleeping in people's front yards and stuff. So it's a cool one. And it also sets you up nicely for that last stretch from Spring Creek Pass all the way to Silverton, or theoretically, you could go all the way to Durango on a resupply from Lake City. It would be hard because you'd be going about 130 miles, but certainly doable.
And Silverton's also a great town. So I would definitely recommend stopping in Silverton. It's an old mining town. It's small, it's super cute, it's very walkable. There's again like good restaurants, good breweries. Like I think it's worth a stop.
Yeah, I think so too. The only downside with Silverton I found is it's really hard to get an affordable place to stay, especially if you show up sort of in the afternoon and don't have something booked already. It can be a little bit difficult, but I love it. I think it's a great little town. It's really fun and kind of fierce. It's got this sort of fierce vibe to it where everybody's very proudly Silverton. It's a nice place whenever you're in a city where everybody chooses to be there and wants to be there. And I think that's a pretty cool dynamic as well.
Let me give a shout out since you mentioned housing in Silverton. So there is a historic hotel and hostel in Silverton called the Avon. Full disclosure, a really close friend of mine is the part owner of the hotel. He's not often there because he actually lives in Boise, Idaho, but they have bunk rooms. I mean, I did book in advance. My friends and I got like a hotel room in there, which had two separate rooms. So one had, I think, like a queen or a king bed. One had a smaller bed, but they do actually have bunk rooms there. So that's a good option.
Yeah. And that's the Avon you said?
Yeah.
Oh, that's dynamite. Yeah. Really
and
good tip on that.
It's really cool. Like it's a historic building. It used to be, what do they call the old pubs that like the miners would go in?
A saloon?
Yeah, a saloon. It used to be a saloon. It still has that vibe, and it's very much a community place. Like the downstairs, they have a kitchen with this huge walk-in cooler that you're welcome to use. Like they have this whole big restaurant kitchen that they're not using for anything because they're not making food. And so you're welcome to go back there. They have like a big bar. You're welcome to bring in your own booze. Like they've got games, they've got a TV, they've got a theater downstairs. Super cool spot.
Yeah, that's dynamite. That's a really good tip, especially because I think a lot of folks, get to Silverton, and when you look on when I got there, I had a really hard time. I was checking my phone, and I accidentally booked a hotel somewhere there I was trying to get it for the night I was there and accidentally booked it for the next night. So it ended up, it was a big mess, and it was a long story, but it ended with me ending my thru hike in Silverton in 2020. So I made it, what's that?
What?
Yeah. It was absolutely maddening. Yeah. So I ended up, I only had 3 days to get from Silverton to Durango. And when I booked the wrong night hotel, it was like $300. So I didn't want to miss it. And so I had to stick around, which would have given me like a day and a half to make it 75 miles across the, and I tried everything like moving car reservations because I had a rental car in Durango to go back home. And if I moved my reservation one day, it went from being a $200 reservation to a $1,600 reservation. And so there's just no way for me to have like done it and been sure to be back. So it was really something. But in the bigger picture, it was advantageous because I went back and did it the next year and made it all the way to Durango. But had I not done that, I wouldn't have met my wife on trail in 2021. And there were a lot of folks that I met along the way that year that I'm still very close with. So it worked out in the long run. And now I'm really hooked still every year going back to the CT. So yeah, it's a good place. We've got a,
that's interesting that you met a lot of people out there, because I feel like I didn't meet very many. Like I met people, I would say, in the first week of the trail, and then we didn't see, honestly, that many people.
Oh, really?
I did it in August, though. I know a more popular time to start is in July.
Yeah.
But it was not, I did it with two friends, so I had them with me, but it wasn't a super social trail, I would say, past the first week.
Oh, really? That's a surprise. Yeah, I've been out there a number of different times, and I've always, but I'm also I hike solo specifically to meet people on trail, and so part of the goal is to make friends along the way. So yeah, I think it would have been a little less social, especially the year I went in 2020. A friend of mine hiked with me to Leadville, and we hardly met any new people along the way. But yeah, it'll be interesting. I'm hiking it in August this year, so I'll be
Yeah,
interested to see
we
because
we
in the years past.
just we just didn't see that many people. It wasn't
Yeah.
like we weren't talking to the hikers, like we just didn't see many
Wow.
hikers.
Yeah.
I did I had someone comment on some of my videos last year though, and she hiked it in August and she said it was actually quite busy. So
Yeah. Yeah, it can happen sometimes that way if you're sort of going at the same pace as other people, where there can be a flow of folks, or even depending on when you start, a lot of folks, if they start that July 1st, there's a big bubble that starts then, or that first weekend in July, last weekend in June. Those often have pretty good bubbles of folks. So you tend to meet a lot of folks that way. But I'll be curious to see, because I do expect it to be a little less busy in August when I hike it this year for sure. We do have a hello here. Um, we've got somebody here says, "Hey, Glowstick, so glad to see you getting some exposure that you deserve. Looks like you're getting brave enough to publish your fantastic book, and it's working out well for you. That's terrific. That's really that's kind of vibes we're looking for here, Ken. And so I appreciate you commenting. And then Jeremiah, good to
and
see you
it's the
here.
best.
Right, right.
So I met him through YouTube. We actually just met at AT Trail Days in May. Just
Oh,
such a
cool.
kind person, so
Mhm.
supportive. Ken, you're awesome. I really appreciate you.
That's great. Yeah, that's sort of the vibe around here too, is that we have a lot of folks who are just really supportive, and it's really nice. When I started this YouTube channel, I was worried that I was going to get a bunch of sort of trolls and that sort, and I've found it to not necessarily be that way. Typically, it's really a positive experience, and this is the kind of comment that makes it that way. So I appreciate that, Ken. Jeremiah here seems must have seen our episode. We were on the backpacking podcast with Jeremiah Stringer and John Kelly. I don't know if you know those two. They're sort of East Coast backpackers, but they have this really fun weekly live stream backpacking podcast, and we were really fortunate to be on it. And so it's good to see you here, Jeremiah. Welcome to the show, I guess, right? And then here, Rose is sort of a seasoned Colorado resident through hiker, and said that she stayed in the Prospector Inn in Silverton, fair price, spacious, clean room, and the gas station reservation is pretty classic right there. That sounds like Colorado through and through. All right, so tell me a little bit let's talk about your book a little bit. So the book is specifically about your AT through hike, and you went through the whole process of sort of working through the book and the chapters and editing, and then you got it published up on Amazon recently. Talk to us a little bit about that process, sort of how long it took, why that hike specifically, of all the hikes you've done, why that one was the one that sort of sticks with you as the one to write about. What do you think?
Yeah, so my AT hike was my first big backpacking trip, first through hike. And it was something that I dreamed about for years. And it was something for a long time that I didn't know if I'd even have a chance of being able to do. So 11 years ago, I really messed up my back really badly. I herniated a disc in a group exercise class. It was during like a weightlifting move. And if you don't know what that means, so we have like our vertebrae, and we have discs that are full of like a jelly material in between our vertebrae, and they help our spine be flexible, and they're kind of like shock absorbers, whatever. So one of mine busted open when I did this weightlifting move in a group
Mm,
exercise class. And some people can herniate a disc, not even know it, go on with their lives, whatever. For me, it was completely traumatic and debilitating, and I was in horrendous pain for a very long time after that. And I was only in my 20s when I did it. So insurance didn't want to cover surgery for me. They want to make sure that you try literally everything else before you go into surgery. So that includes like physical therapy and steroid injections and lots of different medications and going to a chiropractor and all kinds of things, which none helped me whatsoever. So during that time in my life, I was doing a lot of reading. I picked up Bill Bryson's A Walk in the Woods. about hiking the AT. I really like the idea, just really latched on for me. And I know a lot of people don't like that book because he doesn't actually through hike the AT, but I loved it because he talks so much about the history of the trail and the natural history of the trail. And that just got me super intrigued. And so I was dreaming about doing this for years. And I told myself, if I'm ever well enough again, I'm going to go out and hike this trail. And so this was huge for me when I got surgery. It was a very long recovery after the surgery. I'm talking like years. And when I finally was well enough, I followed through on my promise to myself and I quit my job in Washington, D.C. I was working at World Wildlife Fund, which was a dream job for me. I'd been there for about 2.5 years and I left to do the AT. So this was a huge pivotal moment in my life, like recovering from the back surgery, finally deciding to leave Washington, D.C. I'd been there for about 7 years and I knew that it just wasn't somewhere that I wanted to stay forever. And so I went into the AT not knowing if I was physically going to be capable of doing it because I didn't know if my back problems would flare up again. Like I didn't know if I was capable of doing it. And I got out there and my back was mostly totally fine. And I just absolutely loved the experience. And it was so life-changing because I just really reset my priorities. And I was like, I don't want to have this like fast-paced life in a big city anymore. Like I still want to have a career. Obviously, you got to make money.
Right.
But it just was a shifting for me. And I knew going into the AT that I wanted to move to Colorado afterwards. And so that was another thing that I followed through on, got done with the AT, started applying like crazy, moved to Colorado. So the AT, I mean, it just changed my whole life.
Yeah.
And the community on that trail is so incredible. So a lot of my book is about the community and about hiking with a trail family and the relationships on trail. Like I feel like people who haven't done it are very surprised to learn that it's a super social trail.
Yeah.
But like I met so many friends out there who are still very near and dear to me.
Yep.
And yeah, so it's just a really life-changing experience. So that's why I decided to write the book about that one. And I initially tried to write it a few months after I finished the AT. I had moved to Boulder, Colorado. I had a new job. And I sat down and started putting all of my journals together and all of my blog posts that I had written while I was out there, putting everything together, started trying to write it. And I couldn't do it at the time. Like I went through really bad post-trail depression after the AT.
Sure.
And it took me several months to really get over it and start feeling normal again. And I really felt like at that time, like I had really just started to come out of the post-trail depression. And I'd moved to Colorado. I hardly knew anybody at all. I'd started this new job. And I was like, I can't keep living in this experience right now. I need to move on. I need to build a life here. I need to like get out of like being sad that this thing is over. So then I shelved the book and I was like, oh, pick this up another time when I have a little more space.
Right.
Didn't pick it up whatsoever for 5 years.
Okay. Yep.
And then I opened it up in October 2023, right after I finished the Wonderland Trail. My roommate works at Renaissance festivals. She's like a booth owner at Renaissance festivals. And she had left for the Texas Renaissance Festival for 2 months. And so I came back from the Wonderland Trail, quiet apartment. And for some reason, like something was telling me like, you got to write again. It's time for you to start writing again. And I was like, I don't know what I'm going to write. So I just, on a whim, like open up this file that I have of all my journal entries and everything. And I start writing and literally do nothing else in my free time for a week and a half. It's like I was possessed. And in a week and a half, I had a first draft.
Yeah. Yep. That's like the, I don't know if you know the book On the Road by Jack Kerouac, but he wrote that one in 3 weeks, but he was hopped up on lots of uppers. So a little different experience, right?
I do drink a lot of coffee. People will ask me in my YouTube videos sometimes, they're like, are you just high on life? Were you a caffeine addict? And the answer is both.
That's terrific. Yeah, I had to cut out the coffee recently because I was turned into a train wreck. But I do love the caffeine as well. But that writing, that whole experience, I think, is really resonates with a lot of folks because I think there's something to the idea of these sort of bigger events that sort of shift your whole life perspective or sort of have this resonance with your life that will reverberate throughout the future of your life. So my mom, I think she might have gotten this from Dr. Phil. So apologies if that's true, but she believes that every person has like 6 moments in their life that define everything. The rest of their life is defined by these different moments. And sort of coincidentally enough, I had an accident in 2006. I fell off a ladder and broke 3 vertebrae. And so similar kind of like not nearly the same recovery you had, ironically, that it was like 2 months in a back brace and then I was pretty well back to normal with some pain, so not nearly as traumatic, but certainly it had this sort of effect on my life that like things become much more fleeting and, you have one life to live, and particularly youth is fleeting, right? Like it doesn't take long. That accident happened when I was, I think 26. And it dawned on me that at 26, every injury was now a lifetime, right? Like it would never, whatever I hurt from now on would still sort of affect the rest of my life. Whereas when I was, 16, I broke my arm, I'd break it, it'd heal back to normal. But now when I had a motorcycle accident and hurt my shoulder and now I can't sleep on my right side, that sort of thing, that there's like, it doesn't hurt anymore, but it just sort of, you get the idea. But I love the idea that this is sort of, and a couple of things that I like about that story is specifically that you took the leap, right? Even when everything's going well, which I particularly love, because one of the things I dislike about a lot of hiking books is how they sort of present it like your life has to collapse and crater before you can go out and through hike, right? And so I like the idea that this was sort of the opposite. That inverse, I think, is important to have that perspective. And then I also like that sort of how you dealt with the post-hike depression by thinking like, all right, well, I need to shift my perspective and like look forward rather than backward, right? Like quite literally perspective shifting. And so I think that's really, will speak to a lot of people, I think. And so far people are loving it on Amazon. I mean, it's got over 100 reviews, 4.5 stars overall average, and just absolutely crushing it. So that's, I mean, just incredibly well received so far. So that's really dynamite. So where people can get the book on Amazon? And then do you have a preference? Is it better for you if they buy the ebook, if they buy the print book? What's the story there?
No, it's about the same. So it's on Amazon and Kindle, and then it's on a few other platforms as well, like Target.com and BarnesandNoble.com. But Amazon's really the place where it's sold the most. But if people want to get a signed copy, they can reach out to me directly and I can, sign it and mail it out myself. But in terms of like ebook versus paperback, I make about the same amount either way. So whatever the preference is.
Cool. Yeah, that sounds, I mean, that's a very generous offer, by the way, to have a signed copy before you become super famous. This is going to be, I mean, you're already famous, but I'm talking super famous is the real thing here.
So, well, I started doing it because I got so many requests.
Yep. Yeah. People, I mean, it's one of those things where, especially when you hike the trail like that and you have a unique perspective, people really want to know what you have to say about it. Right. Yeah. How did, so people generally, I mean, they've obviously been receiving it really well. Has there been sort of a thread among the positive reviews that you sort of appreciate about that? Like, are they saying similar things, or has it been very, like, they like different things?
Yeah, so it's kind of interesting because I haven't read a ton of hiking books myself. I've definitely read a few. I haven't really read any recently because as soon as I started working on this project, I didn't want to be influenced whatsoever by anyone else's voice or anyone else's ideas or how they tell stories. So it's kind of interesting looking through the reviews, which I've had to stop doing because I've gotten a couple of really mean ones.
Yeah.
And even though the majority are very positive, and I'm super grateful for that, like the bad reviews they feel really personal because it's my lived experience and just
right.
totally break my heart. And sometimes people are just saying things about the book that I find to be untrue, like they're misunderstanding me in some way.
Mm-hmm.
And I just want to be able to come back to them and be like, no, but I can't. So anyway, I've had to stop reading the reviews for my own mental health and sanity. But I think that one thing I've heard over and over from people is something similar to what you said, whereas they like that the book is not really based on trauma.
Yeah.
Which a lot of books seem to be, especially since Wild came out and got so popular. It very much focuses, like there's a little bit of my background. I do talk about my back injury and things like that, but it's very much a book about what life was like on trail for me.
Yeah.
And then again, people seem very, very surprised that it wasn't this solo, quiet, lonely wilderness experience. And I get it, because I was very surprised myself. Like, one of my big fears going out there was that I was going to be lonely and bored, which ended up not being the case at all. I couldn't get away from people.
Yeah.
So I've heard that it's very unique in that it does focus on the community and the relationships and the just aspects of being human. We're social creatures. We evolved to be social. And
yeah, I think I have this theory. This is more YouTube related, but I think it sort of carries over to what you're saying, is that I think if you really want one of those YouTube channels that gets like 1 million subscribers, that sort of thing, you have to do one of two things, right? You have to either do something that people want to do, but can't for some reason, like hike the AT, right? And so those channels tend to do really well, or have a special skill, or do something that they want to do. Or you have to do something that's so specialized, you're the only person who can do it. So the people who make I watch a guy who makes tiny motors, right? Like these sort of operational motors, that kind of thing. But I think that, to your point about the book, right? If it's about experiencing what life's like on the trail, that's what people want often. And that I think often the popular narratives, the wilds out there, or I mean, there are dozens of them. I have this silly sort of YouTube short about how everybody thinks you have to sort of have your life crater to go on a big hike like that. But I think it's far more relatable if you're just saying, like, these are the friends I meet, and this is the experience I had, and this is where it was like a crummy day and this a low day, or these are the highs and lows. I think that's what people want to know, so that they can go out and really figure out if it's something that they could do eventually, or if they can't do it, they can live vicariously. So that's makes a lot of sense to me that people would be drawn to it for that reason specifically too. Are you going to do any readings, any sort of book signings, anything big like that coming up?
So I went to AT Trail Days last month, and I was in the author section of the festival as an author. So that was really special, because I got to meet several other trail authors, which was really exciting and cool. And just like, none of my friends are writing books, and many of them are not hiking long trails. So it was nice to be able to meet some like-minded people. And then I got to meet a lot of my YouTube subscribers, which was also really, really special. I'm kind of sensitive, so sometimes I don't know if I should be online, because when people are mean to me or troll me, like, it really affects me for a couple of days. Yeah. So I think I had like just gotten like some mean feedback, and then I went and I was like, should I even be going to Trail Days? Like, whatever. And then I got there, and people were so nice and so supportive and so like-minded, and it was just a really special experience. So that was super cool. I don't have any other in-person events planned, except for I'm going to see my family pretty soon. I'm going to go on like a kind of a family reunion camping trip with them for 4th of July. And I've been asked to come speak at the Garden Club's monthly event.
There you go. That's great. Yeah. Yeah, that's dynamite. And the family trip is also going to be pretty cool. I mean, that time of year as well. But I'm sure there are more book signings to come. I think there are a number of booksellers around the country who are going to be eager to host you for some events and such. So that's really exciting. And that Trail Days in Damascus is supposed to be just incredible. So I'm really jealous you got to make your way out there as well.
It was a lot of fun, and I loved that section of the country. I loved that part of the AT running through Southern Virginia, and it holds such a special place in my heart. It's actually like what I named my book after, Where the Rhododendrons Bloom, because when I crossed basically from Tennessee into Virginia, which is very close, like the border is very close to Damascus. I want to say it's like 10 miles or something like that into Damascus. Basically, it turned to springtime. And so I run kind of cold. I'm a cold sleeper. I spent my first month on the AT absolutely freezing, wearing all my clothes. And then I get into like Virginia, and the leaves come out on the trees. The flowers start blooming everywhere. I'm warm. My life changes.
They're the tiny ponies.
The ponies. I mean, everything was going really well in my trail family at that time. And like all my friendships were getting super deep. And it was just like a really, really special place on the trail for me. So it was really fun to go back to Damascus and experience that again. And I don't know if I ever would have gone back to Trail Days just as like a past hiker. I liked having a job there. I liked having a little corner where I like got to sit, but then I'd go out and wander and like talk to people and see the other shops and everything. But yeah, it was a lot of fun.
Yeah, that's super cool. Are there any follow-up plans for another book in the a sort of not a sequel, I guess, but a follow-up?
I don't know. We'll see. I think, the AT it took me 6 months basically. And so 6 months fit into a book, right? So I look at these smaller trails and I'm like, I don't know what I'd really, for something that's 2 weeks or a month. Like I just can't see writing an entire book about
It could
that
be
experience.
episodic too. You could do like reflections or ruminations, do a little there's a really great book. It's the Pilgrim at Tinker Creek, where she just does these sort of ruminations on different I don't know if you've read it before. If you haven't read it, it's right in your wheelhouse. I mean, it's just incredible. It won the Pulitzer in might have been 76, 86, but it's this beautiful reflection on sort of Western Virginia, not West Virginia, Western Virginia, there in the Shenandoah Valley. And Annie Dillard does these beautiful reflections on the simplest things, right? So she calls these sort of moments pennies, right? Like there's different things that happen when you're paying attention to nature that seem insignificant, like a penny, but when you really examine it, it's usually very intricate and very just worth your time to examine, right? So it's sort of episodic is the thing. Episodic is not the right word, but you certainly have enough experience that you could draw together sort of thematically some different things where you do one about like maybe a chapter on loneliness and hiking and maybe a chapter on community and maybe something. I mean, I used to be a writing professor in my past life before I made a shift, right? Yeah. Not creative writing, but nonetheless, the skills translate, and I see there's a lot of fodder there for you to or a lot of meat on the bone, as they say in the writing world, right? You still got a lot of work that you could work with, and people want to read it, right? We've got folks here who are really excited about this one. Rose talking about the book being a good read, and talking about the sort of the community that took her in, and that's really great. I find one of the things here too about the CT that I love, and it's probably the way on other trails, but I've not experienced it quite the same way on the JMT, which I've done a couple of times at this point. But the diversity of perspectives that you have when you're out there, and the friendships that you can build can cross over these lines that I feel like we don't cross very much in 2024, right? So I think that, you can have people from different parts of the country, different economic backgrounds, professional ages, different faiths and experiences. I think it's a really neat place in that regard.
I actually talk about that a lot with the AT. It's just making friends of all different ages. I feel like in the real world, like most of your friends are right around your own age, right? And people think it's a little weird if you have friends that are of different ages, even though I don't know why that's a thing. But like on the AT, I did it when I was 33, 34, and I made friends with people in their 60s, and I made friends with people who were 18, which I was 18-year-old boys. I was like, what could I possibly have in common with 18-year-old boys, like ever in the real world?
The hiking is the
but
thing,
I absolutely like these. I made friends with these two 18-year-old boys, and I absolutely adored them on the AT. So I think that's really special about trail life too.
Yeah, I agree. I've had two experiences. You got to hear both of them because they're both kind of wild. There was one time on the CT, both of them are CT, but last year, might have been last year, 2 years ago on the CT, I was in Waterton Canyon and I met a kid who was 18 and he was doing the CT because he had already done all of the 14ers in Colorado and I think the PCT as well, which is just incredible life experience and really fun to see. And then there was another one. It's a longer story, but suffice it to say that I watched this woman who was 18 hiking solo the CT do that section we were talking about where you go straight up after Creed. And she walked up it faster than I could have rolled down that mountain. It was just I'm just really incredible sort of hiker. But there was this other drama that happened. There was this boy with her and I saw them break up as I was hiking down to the saddle. So it was, and I watched him walk. He turned the corner to Creed and walked away sad and heartbroken, and she zipped up the mountain and never thought about him again, I imagine.
She's like, bye.
Yeah. It was really, it was this whole drama played out because you can see the saddle for like 2 miles or so. And so I watched them sort of, anyway, it was really funny. I said I wouldn't tell the whole story and then I ended up telling it anyway. All right. So tell me a little bit about this, right? So you and I met on the JMT last year. So that was one where I didn't finish because the hurricane came in. So we finished up at Bishop Pass was the last place that we were on right before.
So that's why when you were talking about the permits, I thought maybe you were going back because I remembered you had to get off trail.
Yeah, no, it ended up just not working out time-wise for us to be able to do it. And it was, I mean, the hurricane that came through, they were just stopping people at the bottom of Bishop Pass and telling them to turn around at the LeConte Ranger Station. And so it was a bummer. I'd already done the trail in 2018 though, so it was particularly tough for my hiking buddy there. But we had met maybe a couple of days prior at VVR, which, by the way, for anybody thinking about the PC or the JMT, VVR is the move. That place is just
It's
absolutely
magic.
incredible, right? Yeah, and I had done the year prior, I had done Reds Meadow, which is great, right? It's good. It's got really good cheeseburgers and such. But that VVR, they meet you at the boat and hand you a beer. It's just, you can't beat it. It's just incredible.
They're amazing.
Yep, absolutely. So tell me a little bit, how would you compare sort of the experience of hiking the JMT with the CT for folks who maybe are familiar with one or not the other? Or plan to hike the CT specifically? That's where a lot of my folks come from, are those CT hikers. What's your take on that?
Gosh, I kind of decided to do the JMT because I loved the CT so much. So I did the CT. It took me 32 days. I did the JMT starting in the Inyo National Forest. So that adds on a little bit in 16 days. So I was kind of thinking like, oh, maybe the JMT will just be like the CT light, right? No, not at all. Not at all whatsoever.
It's so hard, right?
I found them to be completely different trails.
Yep.
The CT I found to be pretty cruisy, like pretty easy for the most part, especially compared to the AT. I didn't expect the JMT to be easy, but I thought it would be kind of similar to the CT, but it was so hard. I went northbound. And I did it in 16 days just because I was like trying to fit in all these other hikes last year. I have a full-time job. I only have so much time to take off. And so I think that we had to average about the same. So on the CT, we had to average 16 miles a day. On the JMT, we had to average 15 miles a day. So I was like, okay, this would be fine. Like,
nope.
The JMT was so hard. And I found it to be really tedious. I don't know if this is just because last year was a record high snow year, like blew all the other snow years away in terms of the record. I think there was 3 times more snow than average or something. And so I went in August thinking, oh, whatever, it'll be cleared out by then, even in places where there's a ton of snow. Like I feel like in Colorado, if we had a high snow year by August, everything would be cleared out, whatever. Not the case on the JMT. There was still a ton of snow out there. For me going northbound, the snow was on the back sides of the passes. So I'd climb up a dry pass, have to slog down. I'd be like, okay, I got the hard work done, right? No, it'd be a slog coming down, trying not to slide down to the mountain into a big lake, trying not to post hole and fall through into a big hole or into rocks. We get down the pass, get to a flat part, and you'd be like, okay, phew, finally, let's cruise.
Nope.
No, lots of avalanche debris, lots of blowdowns, tons of water crossings. We were just texting a mutual friend of ours, Rolf, about this because he was asking us about the creek crossings. And I was telling him, like, I counted 10 in one day with no bridges where you either had to take your shoes off or just ultimately decide you were just going to walk with wet feet all day and that's what I ended up doing. Like I tried at first to take my shoes off and then I was just like, I can't keep doing this. I'll go crazy.
Right. Right. There's Rolf right there. Yep.
So I counted 10 in one day, which is again, just like another tedious thing. And I also felt like with the CT, the climbs were spread out. The hardest part for me, I did the Collegiate West versus the Collegiate East, but I've done both. And the Collegiate West, I would say, is the hardest part of the trail. And you do sometimes have 2 passes in one day, depending on your pace, whatever. And that was fine. It was challenging, but it was fine. But I feel like with the JMT, you climb up one pass for hours, climb down the pass for hours, immediately go back up a really high another one for hours. And then there were also more mosquitoes that I'd ever seen anywhere in my entire life.
They are incredible. Yeah. I did the math on it a while back. I did a sort of a CT JMT comparison, and I think the average sort of feet of gain per mile is, I think it's not significantly higher, but I think it's like 30 to 60 feet more feet of elevation gain per mile on average on the JMT than the CT.
It
It
feels
does.
significant. Although I know, like, for me going northbound, like the northern section actually felt very easy. So I
Yeah.
would guess that's why. I
Yeah.
think probably the elevation is more concentrated
Yeah.
in the southern
Yeah.
section, and then you get to the northern section and it gets very cruisy.
You know what the sneaky part is for me, and I think you might relate. I found that the reason I found the JMT so difficult wasn't necessarily the elevation gain in the bigger picture, right? Because you, as you mentioned, the CT, you've got lots of climbing. The thing was that the steps were so tall that my little legs were, I'm built like I'm just short legs. And so when I'm trying to climb up and down, I'm taking much bigger steps than I'm used to, than I trained for. I do think that the CT, generally speaking, is more cruisy, right? But I do think also, just as a note for everybody, because I think you and I may disagree on this one, I think the East is so hard. And I found the West to be super physically challenging, but it had the mental, like you could see beautiful views. So it kept me moving. Whereas the East, it's just like hot, 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 pine trees, pine trees, pine trees, hot, 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 pine trees, big climbs, sandy gravel. And so I don't know. I mean, I think it's definitely the JMT, I think, is mile by mile much harder for a myriad different reasons. The mosquitoes are super big part of that as well. And also the resupply is so much more difficult. So you've got this logistic layer where the CT, you pass plenty of places where you can hitch a ride or catch a bus or whatever. JMT, you're hiking out to something, or you're paying $100 to have a mule team bring it to you in the woods, right?
I felt like I've been a lot of places in the world and I've been on a lot of hikes. And when I was on the JMT, I felt like I was more remote than I had ever been in my life. Like I would get to the top of a pass and you could see forever. You could see this giant expansive land and it was just mountains. There was
Yep.
nothing there. Like no hint of civilization, which freaked me out a little bit.
Yeah,
I
it's a
mean,
little unnerving.
there was nothing to worry about. And like I carry a Garmin InReach, like if anything happened, whatever, I could reach someone.
Yeah.
But it took my breath away a little bit, along with the elevation, where I was like, I'm really out here in a way that I don't ever remember being before.
Yeah, I mean, unlike the CT, you don't really see day hikers on the JMT. That's not going to happen. So you're only seeing through hikers, either PCT, JMT, maybe the Ray Lakes Loop folks, right? But generally speaking, you're not bumping into the same folks, where it makes you feel far more remote, because in a lot of ways you are. And the CT is just it's a lot more, I think people who head out to the CT and think things like, I've got to send myself all my food to these different post offices, that's sort of indicative of this feeling that you're heading off so remote that you're not going to be able to buy ramen noodles, right? Which is really not the case, but I understand that sort of anxiety, because if you think of what your picture of the AT was before you went, it makes a lot of sense. And the CT certainly feels more remote when you don't know about it, right? And there are sections that are remote, but not necessarily like the JMT I found.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I do think like when you're in the collegiate wilderness, that feels like you're very remote, but it's different somehow. Like especially because I did do the JMT in a high snow year. I was going northbound. I definitely think more people were going southbound. Like all the cool people I met at VBR, you all were going southbound.
Yep.
But yeah, like I wasn't really seeing a lot of other people at all on the JMT, even far fewer than I saw on the CT. And yeah,
what
just
time
not
of year
being
did you
able
do
to.
the JMT?
Sorry?
When were you on the JMT? What time of year?
At the same time as you in August.
No, oh, that's right. I'm sorry. I'm slow. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I did it the first time in July, and actually I went Nobo. Started probably Cottonwood Lakes, I think, Cottonwood Pass, one of the two. And there were so many people, I started getting frustrated having to step off trail, because when I was going northbound, everybody was going southbound, and you just have to wait. So I spent a lot of time just standing on the side of the trail, waiting on people to pass, that kind of thing. And so it's a little different. It's, I mean, because I think there were fewer people in August when we went for sure. And that was also the year when they were telling people not to come out because of the bridge outing, and the snowpack was so heavy that particularly that Whitney climb, people were very, very hesitant to say you should go up it, especially if you're going to have to try to go down that backside with all the snow. And I think people did get hurt that way, but by the time we were out there, it was plenty safe, I think.
Yeah, there was one sketchy snow crossing on Whitney, and it was probably the most scared I've ever been. But it turns out that I could have just walked around it, so that was unnecessary.
Yeah, fair enough, right? Hindsight's 2020. Yep. Now, if you were to recommend to somebody who's sort of getting into through hiking to start with the CT, JMT, some other trail, where would you tell them to start?
Oh my gosh. Well, I would not recommend the JMT as a starting hike. And again, this might just be because of the conditions last year. Like I've talked to people who've done it in other years.
Yep.
And like I told them about all these different things, like all the snow and the avalanche debris, and they're like the mosquitoes, and they're like, I didn't experience any of those things.
Yep.
So maybe it was just a conditional thing. But I was thinking while I was out there hiking, like I know beginner through hikers hike this trail, and I was like, y'all are crazy. Like this is not a good starter hike, in my opinion.
Well, I think there's a lot more information is the thing that they like. People who are really information obsessed can find out a lot more about the JMT for a shorter through hike than many of the others, right?
But it's logistically challenging too, right?
Yep. It very much is, yeah.
So I would definitely recommend the CT over the JMT, even though it's longer. But if I don't know. I know people jump into these long trails. Like people do the AT or the PCT as their first through hike, right? Which is totally cool and awesome. But if you want to just kind of put your toes in a little bit first, I would recommend the Foothills Trail in North and South Carolina. It's logistically pretty darn easy. The trail is not super challenging at all. Yep. The campsites are amazing. It's very well maintained. I think it would be very difficult to get lost. I think that would be a great starter trail.
Yeah. Yeah. I've seen a number of folks who have done that trail and really enjoyed it and found it to be surprisingly beautiful for that area. Yeah.
I'm going to go back and do it again sometime.
Yeah. Yeah. I've got that. I think about a little bit the sort of the collegiate loop. I think if you are physically fit and sort of interested in figuring out if you like it, that one works really nicely too. Because it's 160 miles. It's super beautiful on that collegiate west area. And then also logistically super easy to navigate, to your point too. And, but I think those are all really helpful tips too. All right, so we are nearing we're nearing the finale here. So I want to point out a couple of different things. You're gonna have to make sure that these addresses are correct. So you can catch Audrey's channel here, Audrey Adventures on YouTube, and then Instagram at Audie Payne. And then your trail name is Glowstick. So why don't we have that as our sort of wrap up question? How did you end up with that trail name there?
So I got it on the AT. At the time when I did the AT, I was really into live music and I really liked going to festivals. And so the first night on Springer Mountain, I open up my tent, and inside is a bright yellow glowing glow stick, like it had just cracked, because I hadn't opened my tent for several months. And the last time I had used it was at a music festival at Devil's Backbone Brewery in Virginia, which is a great stop on the AT, by the way. And then I also got off the AT for 2 weekends to go to Bonnaroo, another music festival that's in Tennessee, and then to go to a wine festival in the Finger Lakes in New York that I used to go to every year with my family and friends. So my friends thought it appropriate to call me Glowstick.
Yep. I mean, super fitting, right? And it's a cool trail name too, because it's one that's not super common. So that's a good one for sure. Well, cool. Well, thank you so much. I want to share the name of your book again here. My eyes were going sort of twisted. So if I misspelled rhododendrons, nobody call me out on it, because it very well could have happened.
No, that looks right to me.
It looks right. It could be completely wrong though. So a couple of little things just to mention here. So Jerry here at Tangent Trails, I want to mention here, he's talking a little bit about the fire season, stressing him out. And this is certainly something for everybody to keep an eye on. Specifically, there, I believe the report today said the fire in segment 11 down there near Twin Lakes, the Interlaken fire, is 45% contained at this point. But the last thing I read said they were going to have that area closed until at least mid-July. So the CTF has posted a reroute option for different folks, and super helpful. Make sure that you're following those reroutes. 85% now. That's great news. Thank you, Jerry. This is a really important one. So when you're going out on these trails, I think it's important for people. Personally, I know there's going to be a fire ban in Colorado, but when you're going anywhere on a through hike, the fires are just not necessary, in my opinion. You're going to get to camp late. You're going to be tired. Often, if you are finding wood that's dry enough to light up, you're not near water. That will help you put it out. So there are a lot of different reasons I'd encourage folks to try not to have a fire, especially out in these places that are really precious. If you've ever hiked segment 2 during the middle of the day, you'll know why fires are tough for people in the future. Those are really gnarly. Or hiked out of Breckenridge at Gold Hill Pass. That's another spot where there was a fire, and it is gnarly aggressive. So keep an eye on those fires. Make sure that you're following the news on those, and making sure you're keeping a close eye on that one. And really keep those firefighters in your thoughts. As this is a safety issue. The fire at Interlaken, I believe, was started. I don't know if you've seen any news on this. I believe it was some campers just left their fire smoldering and it lit up, which is no surprise in that area. It's super dry. Just incredibly dry, really frustrating and kind of heartbreaking there as well.
Yeah, I honestly, I remember a couple of years ago, there was a fire ban in all Colorado except that county where Twin Lakes is. And I was wondering at that time, I was like, why wouldn't there be a fire ban here? It doesn't make any sense to me, because that's a super dry area.
Yeah, it's absolutely incredibly dry. And it's also, maybe because the reservoir's there, they think they can put it out quickly or something. I don't know, but it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And it's really, really heartbreaking to think about that area. And there's that's where the historical buildings are, and hopefully those are going to be able to be protected. I don't know any news on that one yet, but it's just unnecessary and careless and all the things, right? And then in a more positive corner of the world. So I've been mentioning to everybody here, I don't know if you know about this yet, Audrey, but I've been working with a nonprofit out of Denver there, your neck of the woods. And I'm working on a project. It's called 50/50 on the Colorado Trail, where I'm going to hike the trail using only gear that was available 50 years ago. And so very excited about it. I've got some big news. I don't know that I can share it just yet, but there is a certain sleeping bag company that I absolutely love, and they have agreed to make me a sleeping bag using their 1974 pattern. And so I'm super amped about that one. Very excited about it. And I'm working with the Colorado Nonprofit Development Center. They sponsor a number of different really cool projects. So if you do decide to check this out, everybody in the crowd, if you can, if you're able, there's a spot to donate. If you're not, that's okay. But if you do decide that you're interested in supporting the project, those donations are tax deductible. Also businesses, if you are a business, same thing holds true. I'm opening up some partnerships as well, and there are a couple of really cool brands coming on board. I believe this week there may be a couple of big announcements there. So check that one out. I'm super excited about it. A little bit nervous as well, because I think if you're watching here, a couple of folks know about those external frame backpacks and how uncomfortable they can be after a while. And for me, it's not the discomfort that's going to make me nervous. It's the sound of all the jangling hooks and rattles and cotter pins. I don't know that my ADHD brain can pay attention to anything else if I have those jangling in my ears. So I'm a little bit nervous about it, but I'm very excited about that project. Check out the website. I think it's turning out pretty well. I'm making some changes. And for sure, check out Where the Rhododendron Blooms. Again, I can't say this enough. The reviews are absolutely stellar. I think it's clearly one of those books that's going to make its way into the canon of hiking books, which is no easy feat given the challenges out there with other folks writing big books. But very much a contender. Congratulations on publishing it. It's really cool. Hopefully you'll come back and talk with us when you do the follow-up book with all the themes I've outlined for you here as your writing consultant.
Just write the book for me. That would be helpful.
I've got lots of books that are 80% of the way written, right? That's the whole thing about having ADHD. I can get you to 80%. You're going to have to take the last 20% across the finish line, right? Yeah, well, thank you so much, Audrey. I appreciate it. I know I probably talked your ear off a little more than I probably should have asked questions, but I appreciate your time being here tonight. For all of you here, please, please, please check out this book. Check out all of Audrey's socials, and her YouTube channel is really terrific. She's got some Colorado Trail tips out there as well. So definitely worth checking those out as well. Everybody have a great night, and happy Father's Day to the fathers out there as well. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Thanks.